The lucrative job offer was a game changer, and despite uprooting our lives, Tracy and I embraced the fresh start. We bid farewell to loved ones and our familiar surroundings, optimistic that the relocation would bolster our bond. Shortly after settling in, Tracy secured a position at a call center and swiftly formed close connections with her colleagues. Their social sphere became intertwined with ours, and we spent a significant amount of time with her new acquaintances. I held the belief that our marriage was resilient, that we were crafting a fulfilling life together. I was oblivious to the cracks forming in our foundation. "Where did you get this?" she inquired, her voice laced with astonishment. "Seriously? I'm presenting undeniable evidence of you kissing another man, and your initial concern is the photo's origin? Does it even matter?" I countered, confronting my wife of 7 years. "It appears compromising," I concede. "We kissed, but it doesn't constitute infidelity. We were in a public setting, not engaging in intimacy," she argued. "That's your justification? No clarification about his identity or the reason for the kiss? Simply because you weren't being intimate on the dance floor, you deem this acceptable? Brian, you're overreacting. We were swept up in the moment. There's no need for concern," she stated firmly. "Innocent? You haven't even disclosed his name. Why shouldn't I be disturbed? Does his name have any relevance? You might act rashly and get hurt, and that's the last thing I want," she retorted. "Thanks for the honesty," I snapped, retreating upstairs to gather my belongings. She pursued me. "What are you doing? What does it look like?" "I need some space to clear my head before I act on impulses I'll later regret." "Brian, you would never hurt me. Until today, I believed you would never betray me," I retorted. "Cheat? I didn't cheat on you," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "And there's the lie again, but I didn't," mimicking her earlier defense. "Kissing isn't cheating." "Then what would you classify this as?" I presented another photograph from the same evening. She stared at it, rendered speechless. How did you, she stammered. "Does the source truly matter? You were dishonest, and now our marriage is over." She dropped the pictures and began to weep, reaching towards me. "Stay away from me, Tracy. I offered you an opportunity to be truthful. I might have considered staying and working through this for Bobby's sake, but you chose deception. I'm taking my phone, and unless it's a genuine emergency concerning Bobby, refrain from contacting me." She nodded silently, and I departed, consumed by anger and heartbreak. That Friday night, I sought refuge in a motel to contemplate my next course of action. Divorce seemed inevitable, but it meant Bobby growing up in a fractured family, and I would be financially supporting her affair through child support and alimony. I wished she had at least extended an apology or an explanation. Perhaps she hadn't fully considered the repercussions. I needed time to process and determine the appropriate next steps. The solitude weighed heavily, and I succumbed to tears before finally drifting off to sleep. The following day, the barrage of text messages began. After completing my engineering degree, I had commenced my career at a local chemical packaging plant. 5 years of dedicated work culminated in a promotion to facility manager at a prominent research center 1,000 miles away. The significant pay increase prompted us to seize the opportunity and relocate, leaving behind our support system. Tracy found employment at a large call center predominantly staffed by women her age. A year later, we welcomed our son, Bobby. Although I suggested she remain at home, she thrived in the company of her colleagues, who swiftly became our social circle. We frequently gathered with her friends and their spouses. While I maintained workplace friendships, our social interactions primarily revolved around her group. I occasionally felt like an outsider, but everyone treated me with respect. Now, these same individuals were inundating me with messages, attempting to intervene after Tracy divulged the details of our marital issues. I was astounded by her selective disclosure. The only person who hadn't initiated contact was Tracy, aware that I would block her. Cassidy, her closest confidant, spearheaded the effort, proposing a meeting at her residence on Sunday evening. I countered with a neutral venue, a restaurant, where I could easily depart if the situation became uncomfortable. They reluctantly agreed. I had my own motivations for attending. I sought answers. Why did Tracy engage in this behavior? What were our friends' perspectives on infidelity? Did any of them have prior knowledge of or facilitate her affair? Upon my arrival, I observed that they had arrived early, likely to formulate a plan. Tracy immediately rose to greet me, but I halted her, requesting to be seated at the opposite end of the table. Cassidy swiftly complied, assuring me that the meal was their treat. Positioned in a private dining area, after ordering, I articulated my need for transparency. I understand your desire to help us navigate this situation, but Tracy chose to share our private matters with you before even discussing them with me. This demonstrates a lack of respect for our marriage. Before we proceed, I require honesty. Who is this man? If no one can be truthful with me, then there's no point in continuing this conversation. A profound silence descended upon the table. Even Cassidy, typically loquacious, remained quiet. No one claimed ignorance or revealed the man's identity. I received my answer. Thank you for your time. I hope someone appreciates my steak, as I've completely lost my appetite. Clearly, no one here is genuinely interested in salvaging our relationship. I stood and departed. Tracy called after me, but her friends remained silent. It was evident that their loyalty lay solely with her. Tracy and the group were visibly shocked. They had anticipated a calm discussion, but were ill-prepared for my direct approach. They would need a new tactic to engage with me. After departing the restaurant, I procured some fast food and returned home. I settled the bill at the drive-thru and proceeded to my residence. I needed to formulate a strategy, and quickly. My future, and Bobby's, depended on it. The babysitter Tracy had hired was already there when I arrived home. I quickly moved my clothes and personal belongings into the spare bedroom. Over the weekend, I'd purchased new locks for the spare room and hallway bathroom. I installed them not to avoid Tracy, but to prevent any unwanted advances. Once settled, I spent some time with Bobby before putting him to bed. Tracy arrived home around 10:15 p.m. She rushed upstairs, seemingly excited to find me sitting by Bobby's bed, watching him sleep. I waved her off to maintain the peace and quietly closed the door. She tried to hug me, smiling. I'm so glad you're home. Let me fix you something to eat. We need to talk. I've already eaten. Where have you been? With your lover again? I asked. No, I just left the restaurant. They were helping me find the right words to fix things, she insisted. I'll talk after you tell me his name. Until then, we have nothing to discuss. I can't, she stammered, visibly distressed. Your loyalty to him is stronger than your loyalty to me, your husband. I'll be staying in the spare room. Don't touch me. Who knows what you've been exposed to? But this won't keep me away from Bobby. If you want to talk, your first word should be his name. Otherwise, don't speak to me. She walked away crying. A week passed. We both interacted with Bobby but avoided each other. Then one Monday evening after work, I arrived home to a surprise. Nothing seemed amiss until I entered the kitchen. Tracy's group of friends was there, encircling me. Where's Bobby? I asked immediately. I took him to the sitters. He's spending the night, Tracy explained. I was taken aback, realizing they had orchestrated this without my knowledge. I didn't see your cars parked outside, I observed. We parked a block away so you wouldn't drive off if you saw us, Cassidy replied. You definitely surprised us. What's going on? Has something changed? Yes, it has, Tracy said. Can we go to the living room? Sure, but I need to use the restroom first. I'll join you in a minute. I went to the hallway bathroom, used it, washed my hands, and discreetly started recording on my phone, slipping it into my shirt pocket. When I joined the group in the living room, I was met with another surprise. 2 additional people. I instantly recognized the man Tracy had been with, sitting beside a younger woman. Brian, this is Elliot Franklin and his wife Gail. They're longtime members of our friend group, but you haven't met them before. I know this is a shock, but you were so determined to know who he was, we thought this was the best way to introduce him. If you try to start anything, the guys will step in. No one wants anyone hurt tonight. So now you give me a name, huh? A little late to worry about me getting hurt, isn't it? I replied sarcastically. None of you cared about me being hurt. Your only concern was keeping Wonder Boy here safe. Don't worry, I'm not going to touch him. I don't want whatever diseases he's passed on to Tracy. Everyone groaned in frustration. Cassidy spoke up. Brian, we understand you're upset, but let's avoid using harsh language. We want to talk calmly. You asked for his name, and now you have it. We thought you'd want to speak with him, and that's why he's here. But Elliot can speak for himself." Elliot stood and extended his hand. "I'm sorry this started off badly. I hope by the end of this, we can at least be civil. I'll treat you with respect, and I hope you'll do the same. May I call you Brian?" I didn't take his hand. "Since this is the first time we're meeting, Mr. Franklin, you can call me Mr. Wilson. I can't imagine us ever being friendly. You talk about respect, but you've already disrespected me in the worst possible way. Yet I'm supposed to be civil? Fair enough, Mr. Wilson. I only meant respect during our conversation, not about the past. I'd like to explain what happened between me and the woman you married. Don't call her my wife. That title might not last, and I find it distasteful. I'm considering divorce, as I'm sure you know. How should I refer to her then? Call her the woman I married, for now." "Very well, Mr. Wilson. I'd like to explain what happened between me and the woman you married in hopes it might make sense to you." "I'm listening, Mr. Franklin. Go ahead." Elliot took a deep breath. "Look around this room, Mr. Wilson. What do you see? A group of exceptionally attractive men and women, including the woman I married. Do you think that's a coincidence? This group was drawn together because of our shared attractiveness and connection. As our friendships deepened, so did our intimacy. Every person here is in a happy, committed relationship, and we believe the same about you and the woman you married." I glanced around. The women were dressed provocatively, but not trashily, clearly accentuating their appearances. They all smiled at me, as if silently flirting. Elliot continued, "Take my wife, Gail. She's beautiful, and I'm committed to her for life. No one, including you, could take her from me. That security allows us to share each other with others in our group. It helps us grow beyond the limits of traditional monogamy, which is outdated. We believe in trust, intimacy, and openness to strengthen our marriages." "How nice for you and your wife, Mr. Franklin, and for the rest of this group, if you all freely engage with one another. But that has nothing to do with me or the woman I married." "Mr. Wilson," Elliot responded, "didn't you just admit that you have less trust, understanding, and security in your relationship than the others here? Can't you see how opening up could benefit you both?" He gestured to the group around us. "If that's true, Mr. Franklin," I said, "you're calling every woman here, including the one I married, immoral. I'm disgusted that you turned her head so easily. A real gentleman never interferes in a marriage like you have. I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Wilson, but this isn't one-sided. You're encouraged to embrace these ideas, too. You could be with any woman here if you wanted. When you both joined this group, it was only a matter of time before the topic came up. The woman you married had numerous conversations with her co-workers and approached the idea carefully because she was concerned about your reaction. After many discussions, she decided to test the waters with me, thinking it could benefit your relationship. If you hadn't confronted her so harshly, she planned to talk to you about the positive effects this could have." He continued, "She said your aggressive confrontation rattled her, and she panicked. If you had approached it differently, we believe you'd see the benefits for both of you. We just need to make you more comfortable with the idea." I looked Tracy in the eyes. "Is this true? Did you talk to them about all this without telling me? And then decide to experiment with Mr. Franklin without discussing it with me first?" Tracy nervously nodded. "I heard how much it strengthened their marriages and wanted that for us. I thought experiencing it with Elliot could help us. My love for you hasn't changed. I just wanted to show you how it could improve our relationship." She smiled, hoping to get through to me. "So, I'm supposed to believe that one encounter with him turned you into an expert? This wasn't your first time with him, was it?" She looked down, confirming my suspicion. Elliot jumped in again. "Don't you see, Mr. Wilson? She's realized the benefits, and you could too. Plus, there are other advantages you haven't considered. Go ahead, enlighten me." "Well, she'll gain experience and techniques from her time with me, which will enhance your relationship too." "I see. You think you're some kind of expert, don't you?" "Mr. Wilson, I'm experienced and skilled at helping less experienced partners, like the woman you married, grow. She'll learn and bring that knowledge back to your relationship. Her time with me and others will expand her horizons. Everyone falls into ruts sometimes." She mentioned wanting to try new things. I turned to Tracy. "When did I ever resist trying new things? If you wanted to spice things up, why didn't you talk to me before jumping into bed with him? She answered quietly, "Please don't take it the wrong way. You're gentle and sweet, which I need most of the time. But sometimes, I want something more forceful and direct, which Elliot provided. He wasn't trying to replace you. He's just different, and I enjoyed that. It took all my self-control not to attack him. Any hope of salvaging my marriage for Bobby's sake was gone. Inside, I was furious, but I maintained a calm exterior. Now that I was set on divorcing Tracy, my goal shifted to gathering information to wreak havoc on the lives of those involved in destroying my home. I decided to play along, feigning just enough interest to make them believe I was considering their offer. I scanned the women in the room, letting my gaze linger. "So, just to be clear, Mr. Franklin, you're saying I can have any woman here to fulfill fantasies I've never acted on because the woman I married wasn't enough?" Tracy looked hurt but remained silent. "Exactly, Mr. Wilson. Any woman here is yours for the taking. I've had intimate experiences with all of them. You can even enjoy my wife, Gail. She's been trained to satisfy even the strongest desires," he boasted, clearly expecting me to cave. "Before making any decisions, I'd like to see what each woman has to offer. I'd like to see everyone in action." Franklin chuckled. "You think highly of yourself, Mr. Wilson, but you're not prepared to handle every woman here tonight." "Of course not. But I want to see if what you say is true. Let's have everyone swap partners right now, in front of me. That way, I can assess who I want to sample first. The woman I married, and I will just observe. The only exception is you and Gail. I want you two in the master bedroom, demonstrating all kinds of physical engagement, so I can see the skills you claim to have taught her." Franklin was taken aback. "And how should we decide who pairs with whom?" I smiled and began pairing them up with partners they hadn't been with before, purposely avoiding any former couples. That wouldn't have added to the chaos I envisioned. Franklin turned to the group, still shocked. "Well, everyone, this is our chance to prove to Mr. Wilson that we're serious. Are we all on board?" They nodded and began undressing as the couples found spots in the living room. Tracy and I headed upstairs with Franklin and Gail. "Mr. Franklin, you and Gail can make yourselves at home. Tracy will watch while remaining fully dressed, hoping to learn something. I'll be checking on the action downstairs, so don't hold back." Franklin replied, "You've made an unusual request, Mr. Wilson, but I understand. I'm sure you'll enjoy the view, and we'll all be doing what we love, sharing and caring for each other." With that, I left them to their performance and headed downstairs to observe. Some couples were still making out, while others were already engaged in intercourse. The couch held 4 couples, 2 bent over the armrests, 2 making out. The love seat and chairs were occupied, and the rest of the group had claimed spots on the floor, fully engaged. I walked around the room, observing the undressed women like a predator stalking prey, ensuring my phone's camera captured everything. It was clear this wasn't their first time engaging in this type of activity. I no longer believed Tracy's affair with Elliot was a one-time thing, but the number of times didn't matter anymore. I was set on divorce. I made my way back upstairs, knocking lightly before entering to maintain a semblance of respect. Inside, I found Elliot and Gail. She seemed to be thoroughly enjoying herself, far more than Tracy ever had with me during similar experiences. Despite my disgust, I played the part of an intrigued observer, even feigning admiration. I left the room and returned downstairs, where the others continued their explicit activities. As I moved around, I noticed most of the women had breast implants, which didn't appeal to me, but the natural ones caught my attention. The men were fully immersed in enjoying each other's wives, as if this were just another routine gathering. I watched everything unfold but maintained my distance, resisting the urge to participate. On my final trip upstairs, I entered just in time to see Elliot finishing with Gail, loudly climaxing as she took him fully. I feigned impressment again. "You two really know each other well. We should. We've been married for almost 12 years, Elliot bragged. I stored that information away for later. "Congratulations. It's clear you love Gail deeply," I said, prodding him. "Absolutely. No other woman compares to her, just like I'm sure you feel about Tracy," he added with a smug grin. Tracy, smiling, seemed to believe they were getting through to me. I enjoyed watching downstairs. 3 women in particular caught my eye, and it'll be tough to decide which one to pick first, I hinted. "Why choose just one? We could arrange for you to have all three once you decide to join us, Elliot suggested. 3 women at once? That's always been a fantasy of mine, I replied, feigning temptation. I motioned for Tracy to join me, pretending to extend an olive branch, though the thought of touching her now repulsed me. A few minutes later, everyone was dressed again, though less composed than before. Tracy and I stood facing the group, who seemed pleased with my apparent change in attitude. Brian, have you come to see things differently now? Elliot asked. Will you and Tracy join us at this new level of intimacy? You won't regret it. Your marriage will only get stronger. Are you ready to enjoy 3 women tonight, or would you prefer to schedule it for another time? As much as I'm tempted, I chuckled. I need more time to process everything. Tracy and I need to talk privately. Once we've sorted things out, we'll let you know. Elliot, clearly disappointed, forced a smile. He wasn't expecting a delay, but had no choice. Of course, take all the time you need, he replied, barely concealing his frustration. Suddenly, 3 large men grabbed and held me firmly, preventing any escape. Though I wasn't in danger, the move caught me off guard. Tracy approached, removed my phone from my pocket, and began deleting the videos I had recorded. Brian, we really do want to trust you, but until you're fully part of our group, we need to protect ourselves. It was obvious you recorded tonight's events, and we just can't risk that. Tracy nodded at Elliot. Is it gone? All of it? Yes. There are no recordings left, Tracy confirmed, putting my phone back in my pocket. It was clear to me now that she was fully committed to the group, choosing them over me. I wore the look of defeat that Elliot had wanted. Don't be upset, Brian. I believe you recorded it to help decide who to pick when you join us, but we can't take that chance. I'm sure you saw enough to make your choice without the recording. Let us know when you're ready. He patted my back, and the group quietly left. A few of the women flirted on their way out, mouthing, "Call me," as they departed. Once they were gone, I grabbed my keys to leave. Where are you going? Tracy asked. To pick up Bobby, I replied. I thought we could reconnect tonight. Watching all that really turned me on, and you clearly were excited too. Why not stay and enjoy ourselves? Bobby can spend the night at the Sitters, she said, trying to seduce me. I miss my son. Clearly you don't. I'll be back later, I responded, ignoring her frustration as I left. I drove to the Angus Steakhouse, starving after missing dinner earlier. I enjoyed my meal while reflecting on the evening's events, hoping everything was going according to plan. Later I picked up Bobby, who was thrilled to see me. After getting him settled, Tracy informed me she was making something light for us to eat, but I told her I had already eaten. Clearly upset, she avoided me so as not to upset Bobby. We both prepared for bed since we had work the next day, but she still wanted to talk. Brian, you seemed interested in Elliot's offer earlier, but now you're avoiding me. What happened? She asked. I'm glad you asked. Let's go through some questions to help clarify things, I replied. Go ahead. Earlier, 3 men grabbed me in my own home and you didn't say a word, right? It wasn't like that, she began. Yes or no, Tracy, did 3 men grab me? Yes, but did you object or say anything? Yes or no? No, she admitted quietly. Good. Now, did I ask you to take my phone and delete anything off of it? No, she said softly. Exactly. So you stood by while I was restrained, took my phone, and deleted recordings at someone else's request, not mine. Is that true? Yes, she admitted again. One last thing. No one in that room told you to delete anything, so you must have agreed to do that beforehand, without my knowledge. Is that correct? Tracy looked down at her feet. Yes, that's true. I didn't think of it that way. But you're making it seem like I betrayed you. It was a betrayal, Tracy. Let's revisit your earlier questions. Why did I drop you? What gives? The truth is in your own answers tonight. You showed that you're on their side, not mine, not ours. Now, if you don't mind, I'll be going to bed, alone again. I don't want to be around someone who so casually stabs me in the back. I left her sobbing in the hallway and locked my bedroom door. Around 4 a.m., I heard her try the doorknob, but it didn't open. Tuesday morning, I asked Dan, the vice president at work, do you know a good divorce attorney? One who'll fight hard for a husband? Please tell me this isn't for you, Brian, Dan said. Afraid so, I figured you'd know someone. I've got a good contact, Ted Russ. He handles our legal matters. Let me give him a call. Thanks, Dan. And no need to say it, Brian. This stays between us. Later that day, I met with attorney Beatrice Theron. She told me that while most of her clients were women, she fought equally hard for men. She agreed to take my case and laid out the likely outcomes. I'd be paying child support until Bobby turned 18 and possibly some college expenses. I had no issue with providing for my son, and we discussed aiming for 50-50 custody. As for alimony, Beatrice explained I could expect to pay for 3 to 5 years, depending on the judge, given our income disparity. It annoyed me to think I'd be supporting her while she continued with that group of swingers, but I'd have to accept it. Thankfully, we didn't own the house, so there wouldn't be a property dispute. Tracy could continue renting it without any ties to me. The thought of ever sleeping in that bed again disgusted me, knowing it had been tainted. Beatrice said divorces take about 8 months, if uncontested, a year if contested. I was hoping for the faster route. She also suggested that claiming infidelity might be useful if custody became contentious. I asked her to have the papers served to Tracy at work on Friday at 10 o'clock a.m., ensuring her coworkers would witness it. We also discussed living arrangements. Brian, staying in the house with her could be challenging, especially after she's served. Are you prepared to deal with that? Yes, I can compartmentalize my emotions, but I want to stay close to my son during this time. Be warned, if you have any intimate relations before the divorce is final, the clock resets, extending the process. Even if she just claims it happened, the court may believe her, and it would delay things. That won't be an issue for me, but I can see her trying to sabotage the process. I'll stay strong. Be cautious. She could make a claim, and unless you can prove otherwise, it could complicate things. I thanked Beatrice and left. When I got home, Tracy was making dinner, but I avoided her and went straight upstairs for a shower. I'd started using the hall bathroom, limiting opportunities for her to trap me. It was time to start living separate lives under the same roof. When I came out of the bathroom fully dressed, Tracy was waiting for me in the hall. Dinner will be ready soon. Bobby's already in his high chair. You smell nice, she said, attempting to flirt. Thanks. I'll be right down, I replied, ignoring her comment and unlocking my bedroom door. There was tension, but she didn't push it. During dinner, she began, I want to explain about the phone situation last night. Go ahead. Elliot told me while we were upstairs that he knew you were recording everything, and it wasn't fair to put the group at risk. After you showed me those pictures, he got really concerned. He said they couldn't leave until the recordings were gone. They were prepared to take your phone if needed, but Elliot suggested I delete the videos myself to avoid a bigger issue. I see. And why would they believe you'd do that to your husband? Because I gave them my word, Brian. Interesting. Didn't you also give me your word when we got married? Silence followed, which I welcomed. Honey, I don't want you to think I'm on their side. Isn't that exactly what it looks like? What if those men had grabbed you in our home? Do you think I would have just stood by? What could you have done, Brian? They could have easily overpowered you. Maybe, but I wouldn't have stood by. I would have fought for you because we were a team. Last night, you weren't on my side. I'm sorry you see it that way, but I've explained why I did it. There's nothing more to say about that, is there? I replied. How did you get those pictures, Brian? I want to know. Wouldn't it be something if one of your own friends gave them to me? How would you feel about that? Who was it? Please tell me, she asked urgently. I can't say, Tracy. I gave them my word, I said, grinning, seeing she wasn't getting anywhere. She shifted the conversation. Did you enjoy watching everything last night? Wasn't it exciting? I'm not into group lovemaking. All I saw was people acting like animals. My body may have reacted, but emotionally, it did nothing for me. Exactly. It's not emotional for them either. The emotions are saved for their spouses. What you saw was just pure intimacy. We've been invited to join them. It could bring us closer. How's that working so far? Our marriage is barely hanging on. Don't be like that. You haven't tried it yet. You don't know what it's like. You could try one of the women, or even 3 at once like Elliot suggested. Has our love life been so boring that we need other people to keep it going? It's not about survival, Brian. It's about enhancing what we already have. What's the harm in that? The harm is in destroying trust, Tracy. You've already damaged our marriage. I don't trust you anymore. Since I saw those pictures of you with him, I wonder what you're doing behind my back now. Why didn't you talk to me about it before sleeping with another man? I knew you'd react like this. I thought if I experienced it first, I could bring home what I learned and make things better for us. So you and Elliot think you know better? That you're more enlightened? And I need to be taught? How condescending. Why don't you let me show you what I've learned? I picked up some new techniques from Elliot and watched Gail closely. It's all to improve our love life, not ruin it. Every time I look at you, I see you with him. I don't want to kiss or touch you anymore. All I see is someone who shared herself with another man. You don't own me, Brian. You never have. You're right. I thought you gave yourself to me, but you've taken that back. You've broken something in me, and I'm not sure it can be fixed. She started crying, and that ended the conversation. For the next few days, I spent all my time with Bobby, cherishing every moment. I researched Elliot and Gail Franklin, trying to find more information about them, but came up empty, except for an unrelated homeless man with the same name. I would keep looking. I had Tracy served at 10 a.m. on Friday during a facility manager meeting I was attending. The meeting lasted a few hours and included lunch, so I left my phone on silent. When she called, my secretary confirmed I was unavailable. I wasn't avoiding her, but I wanted to give her time to process the situation before speaking. When I returned to the office, I saw several missed messages from her. I called back, and she immediately started talking, clearly stepping away from others. Finally, do you have any idea how humiliating it was to be served in front of my friends? Are you really divorcing me over this? I told you it was nothing, Brian. Why didn't you answer your phone? My secretary should have told you I was in a meeting. I'm at work, and I just called you back. I never refused to talk to you. We can discuss this after work when we both have time. I'll talk to you then. She started crying. I don't want a divorce, Brian. Please don't do this. We'll talk tonight, Tracy. Goodbye. Later that day, after dealing with some work issues, I left a bit early and picked up Chick-fil-A for dinner, texting Tracy to let her know. She arrived shortly after me, and I brought Bobby inside. She hugged me, but I didn't respond, not wanting to upset our son. I helped feed Bobby and spent the evening with him, knowing a serious conversation was coming. After Bobby was in bed, I found Tracy reviewing the divorce papers. She took a deep breath. I'm sorry, Brian. Is that what you wanted to hear? It's the first apology I've gotten. What exactly are you sorry for? I'm sorry you found out the way you did. I can't imagine how hard that must have been. So you're sorry I caught you, but not sorry for cheating? Don't put it like that. Elliot said once you understood, you'd join us and enjoy the freedom. Of course he'd say that. The problem is neither of you checked with me first. You put more faith in his word than in mine. You're right. I should have come to you first. Elliot even admitted that. After seeing your reaction, he still thinks you'll come around, but now I'm not so sure. Can't we stop this divorce and get back on track? Back on track, Tracy? Our marriage is over. You destroyed it when you slept with him and betrayed me again by siding with them. Just sign the papers so we can both move on. I know you don't want Bobby growing up in a broken home. You wouldn't want him calling another man daddy. Think about that. Reconciliation is best for all of us. You should have thought of that before betraying me. But it's better for Bobby to come from a broken home than live in one filled with lies. Even if we didn't divorce, I could never be with you again. I can't trust you. You don't mean that. What if I stop seeing them? Cut them out of my life completely? You and Bobby are the most important things to me. I don't believe you, Tracy. You've already lied to me. It's too late. Just sign the papers. I won't. I'm not giving up on us, Brian. I'll fight this divorce and win you back. It's a shame you didn't have that faith in us before you cheated. You've heard the saying, once a cheater, always a cheater. That's how I'll always see you. She started crying again. What now? I hope you're not expecting me to leave. I'm staying here with Bobby. You're right. Bobby is my priority now, and I'm staying too. We'll continue living here as we go through the divorce. She looked relieved, even excited, as I confirmed I wouldn't be leaving. Don't worry. I'll stay out of your way. I won't expect you to do my laundry, cook for me, or clean up after me. You handle your needs, and I'll take care of mine. We'll both focus on Bobby. All I ask is that you avoid touching me. To me, you're contaminated, repulsive, and someone I can't stay married to. We'll coexist under the same roof until the divorce is finalized, but nothing more. Her initial excitement faded as she processed my words. I hear you, Brian, but divorce is a long way off. A lot can change, and I'm going to win you back. As long as you keep seeing your friends, there's no chance. And if you ever bring any of them here, you'll regret it. I already told you I'd turn my back on them if that's what it takes. Should I quit my job and be a... No, it's too late for that. Plus, it would only increase the alimony I'd owe in the divorce. She didn't like my response but kept smiling. I decided our confrontations were over. I was focused on my son, and I treated this situation as a temporary business arrangement. We kept conversations brief and polite, saying only what was necessary. We agreed to a few suggestions from Beatrice. I would pay the rent, and Tracy would cover the utilities. I had the utilities transferred to her name, and we each handled our own food and car expenses. I moved half of our savings into a new account, leaving the rest for her. She wasn't happy at first, but eventually accepted it. Once the finances were sorted, she began her own maneuvers. She started dressing provocatively after her evening showers, wearing skimpy or see-through outfits around me. I ignored her attempts to get my attention. Frustrated, she eventually started walking around the house nude, making sure to flaunt herself. Bobby didn't seem to care either way. Tracy also found reasons to engage me in conversation, but I only responded when necessary, keeping things polite. Eventually, she started loudly touching herself with her bedroom door open, making sure I heard. I found it amusing, picturing her with her lover instead of getting aroused. I took care of my own needs privately. One day, I realized the 3 photos of her and Elliot were missing from my drawer. I checked my lock and found scratches. She'd likely hired a locksmith to make a key. The next day, I replaced the locks again, keeping the only keys, and waited for her to realize she no longer had access. After a few months of this stalemate, she started asking me to go out with her to dinner or a movie, but I always declined. Her friends also texted or called, inviting me out. I blocked their numbers without responding. In December, she invited me to her company's Christmas party. I declined, saying I had plans to babysit Bobby. I knew she was disappointed, likely because their group only welcomed couples, which we were no longer. The following weekend was my company's party. I went alone, but she wasn't having it. After dropping Bobby at the sitters, she followed me to the party and tried to make small talk in front of others, but I kept my interactions brief. When I explained the situation to Dan, he just laughed, saying I had guts to live this way. After the party, I picked up Bobby and brought him home. Tracy didn't react as I expected. She seemed grateful for even the small amount of time spent together in public. Despite everything, Tracy continued walking around the house nude, trying to get my attention. I adjusted the thermostat to make the house cooler, hoping she'd cover up. She started wearing sheer lingerie instead. After 2 weeks, I returned the thermostat to normal, realizing my attempt had only partially worked. 5 months after being served, Tracy told me she was going out with Cassidy on Saturday nights and asked if I could watch Bobby. I casually agreed, as long as she didn't bring any of her lovers or friends to the house. I joined a bowling league on those nights, sponsored by my employer. I had a great time, and Bobby loved the attention from the ladies there. It was much better than sitting at home wondering who Tracy was with. One evening I got home after her, and she asked where I'd been with Bobby. I told her the truth, and she asked to join me next time. I explained I only went out when she did, which frustrated her, but making her happy wasn't my priority anymore. She often asked how we could reconnect if I didn't give her a chance and still refused to sign the divorce papers. 6 months in, Beatrice informed me that Tracy's lawyer had successfully pushed for 10 mandatory marriage counseling sessions. I had to attend and actively participate. I asked if I could answer each question the same way, and Beatrice said it didn't matter, as long as I responded. The counselor clearly favored Tracy, but I stuck to one line. I do not wish to remain married to a promiscuous woman. Both Tracy and the therapist became increasingly frustrated with my repetition, but I complied with the law. After 5 sessions, the therapist called off the rest, declaring them unproductive. Following the failed counseling, Tracy doubled down on tempting me with her body, dancing provocatively and making loud, exaggerated moans during her nightly activities. Although she is undeniably attractive, all I could think of was her betrayal, which made her antics unappealing. The next several months passed without any real changes. I spent all my time with Bobby, building a strong bond. 4 days before our divorce hearing, Tracy moved out and took Bobby with her. I was served with a restraining order, barring me from seeing either of them until the court date. Then, Beatrice hit me with 2 bombshells. "Brian, Tracy's now accusing you of raping her on 3 occasions. She claims you forced yourself on her, hoping to reconcile. She's also alleging physical abuse, backed by hospital records of bruises, welts, and a busted lip. She's seeking full custody, with limited supervised visitation for you." "None of it is true, Beatrice, you know that." "I know, but we're in a tough spot. We'll fight this, but it's an uphill battle without solid evidence." I asked Beatrice for the details of Tracy's allegations, which she emailed to me. She also warned me not to contact Tracy or Bobby until she gave the all clear. 2 days later, I walked into the house after work and was shocked to find Tracy sitting at the kitchen table. Her car wasn't outside, so she must have arrived with someone else. My first instinct was to leave, but she stopped me. "Brian, listen to me. If you ever want to see Bobby again..." I stayed calm and faced her, saying nothing. "You don't have to speak, just listen," she said. She took my phone and turned it off to ensure there was no recording. "I tried to get you to come around, but you were too stubborn, so I had to resort to desperate measures. I made up those stories about maltreatment and abuse to get leverage. I knew you'd never hit me, but I needed to ensure full custody of Bobby. Now I'm offering you a deal. Cancel the divorce and agree to join our group of friends, and I'll drop the restraining order and move back in. We can raise Bobby together in a happy home. Think about it. Endless access to the hottest women you've ever seen. What do you say? Will you finally come down from your high horse and live in the real world with me?" I looked her straight in the eyes, letting her think I was seriously considering her offer. "So if I agree to join you and your friends, you're saying I'll have full access to Bobby? No restrictions?" "Of course. Why would I keep a loving father from his son? He adores you, always asks for you, and it breaks my heart to keep him away. Just say yes, Brian, and everything will be fine again," she urged. "I miss him so much. Losing you was hard, but losing him is unbearable," I said, trying to hold back tears. "Just one word, Brian, and everything will be fixed," she coaxed. "I need time to think. I'm struggling to imagine sharing you with other men. Give me a little time." "All right, baby. I get it. You always need to analyze things. We go before the judge in 2 days, though, so I need your answer by tomorrow. Just text me yes, and I'll make everything right. But if I don't hear from you, I'll make sure Bobby grows up hating you, and you'll be paying me to do it. Don't make me do that, Brian. Do it for Bobby," she threatened. She knew how to hit me where it hurt. My son. I told her I'd give her my answer soon, and then asked her to leave. As she walked out, I saw Elliot pull up in his shiny Lexus to pick her up. I had a lot to think about. Beatrice had informed me my presence wasn't required at the divorce hearing, but I wanted to attend. As I exited the restroom at the courthouse, Tracy suddenly appeared and sneered. "You blew your chance, idiot. I'll make sure your son never knows your name. I'll marry a real man who isn't insecure like you and who trusts me. Watch me shred you in court." She spat in my face and walked away, leaving onlookers shocked. I cleaned myself up and hoped Beatrice would live up to her reputation. The courtroom was busy, and I listened to several other divorce cases as I waited. By the time our case started, it was already 1:00 p.m. Tracy testified first, laying out her false accusations of maltreatment and abuse, complete with dates, times, and lurid details. Her attorney painted a picture of me as violent and unfit to be a parent, while portraying Tracy as a victim, doing her best to reconcile. He claimed I falsely accused her of infidelity, and that my jealousy had destroyed our family. When Beatrice's turn came, she calmly asked, "Are you absolutely sure of the dates, times, and locations of these alleged attacks?" "Yes, ma'am. I documented everything on a calendar," Tracy replied confidently. "You're swearing under oath that your accusations are accurate?" "Yes, I wish it weren't true, but it is." "Thank you. No further questions." Tracy smirked, clearly convinced she had won. Then Beatrice called her witness. "I'd like to call Mr. James McMahon," Beatrice announced. A man took the stand, and Tracy and her attorney seemed confused. McMahon introduced himself as the owner of a private investigation firm, hired by me to investigate Tracy's infidelity. He confirmed he had provided me with photographic evidence of her affair, and that his firm retained the original images in secure storage. He presented copies of the unaltered photos, which the judge accepted as evidence. Beatrice then asked, "Did your involvement end there?" McMahon explained, Mr. Wilson then hired my firm to install surveillance cameras throughout his home to monitor Mrs. Wilson's activities, capturing calls and interactions. At this point, Tracy's attorney objected. Your Honor, this is unconscionable. Mr. Wilson could have altered these recordings to suit his narrative. I request this evidence be ruled inadmissible. Judge Feldman listened to the objection and turned to Beatrice. Before I rule, let's establish whether there's a basis for the objection. Counselor Thoron? Thank you, Your Honor. Jim, can you explain the surveillance system installed in Mr. Wilson's home? The cameras transmit wirelessly to a laptop hidden in the crawl space, which is connected to our secure cloud servers. Mr. Wilson doesn't have access to the raw footage. Only we do. The laptop doesn't store any recordings locally. Mr. Wilson's only involvement was replacing the camera batteries monthly. Judge Feldman smiled at Jim. Your firm has an excellent reputation. Objection overruled. Thank you, Your Honor, Beatrice said. Jim, you've heard the accusations against Mr. Wilson. Based on your surveillance, do they hold any merit? No, ma'am, they don't. And how can you be sure? My team reviewed footage from the dates and times provided. In every case, Mr. Wilson was seen peacefully playing with his son, while Mrs. Wilson was in another part of the house. There was no evidence of violence or attack. Tracy and her attorney looked defeated. Jim, do you have any additional insight? Yes. I have a transcript of a phone call Mrs. Wilson made before moving out, where she mentioned hating what she had to do, but planned to falsely accuse her husband to gain leverage. Objection! Hearsay! Tracy's attorney interrupted. We have the original recording if needed, Jim responded. Tracy's attorney sat down, offering no further objection. Thank you, Jim. No further questions, Beatrice concluded. The judge asked Tracy's attorney if he had any questions. No, Your Honor. Judge Feldman addressed the situation. It's clear that Mrs. Wilson falsely accused Mr. Wilson to sway custody in her favor. Perjury is a serious offense, and I will refer this matter to the district attorney for possible prosecution. Full custody of Bobby Wilson is granted to his father, Brian Wilson. Mrs. Wilson will have visitation rights at Mr. Wilson's discretion. Mr. Wilson, I encourage you to be generous with visitation, as your son needs time with his mother. I nodded in agreement. As for alimony, the judge continued, while I'm inclined to award none due to Mrs. Wilson's behavior, I will award $1,000 per month for 42 months. Each party will keep their vehicles, and the accounts will be split based on the balances at the time of filing. No child support will be awarded. Mr. Wilson, do you wish to stay in the current residence? No, Your Honor. I'll move out. Tracy can continue renting if she wishes. Very well. Mrs. Wilson. Tracy stood shakily, and the judge directed her. You have 8 hours to return Bobby to Mr. Wilson. Failure to comply will result in contempt of court. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, she sobbed. All restraining orders are lifted, and I hereby grant the petition of divorce in the case of Wilson versus Wilson. You will receive your divorce decrees within 30 days. Tracy, in tears, realized she had lost. She approached me to comply with the judge's orders. If it's okay, Brian, I'll bring Bobby to you at the house after dinner tonight. I'd like a few more hours with him before I have to let him go. No need for that, I replied. I've already found a new apartment and will be moving there today with some help. Here's the address. I handed her a slip of paper. Bring Bobby there tomorrow at noon. I'll be settled in by then. She nodded sadly. For what it's worth, I'm really sorry. This isn't how I thought things would end. Well, now you can have the exciting life you wanted without me, I said sarcastically. She didn't argue. Thank you, Brian. For what? For not going after Elliot and Gail. They're wonderful people, and it's a shame you never got to know them. I have no interest in them, but I am interested in dealing with your workplace. I found out they have a strict non-fraternization policy. Tomorrow, they'll be served with a lawsuit for allowing policy violations that contributed to my marriage's destruction. Ronald Hensley, your manager, will be named as the main culprit. It seems he's had affairs with several women there, including Gail Franklin. Tracy stood in shock, speechless. I continued. Ronald has a wife and 2 kids. Don't worry. I'll make sure his wife knows everything, including his affair with you. You might still get your man if his marriage falls apart, but he and your friends could be unemployed soon for their silence and covering for him. You're going to get us all fired. How will I support myself? She pleaded. Don't worry. Your job is safe. I promised your company I wouldn't go public as long as they keep you employed. You'll be fine. Maybe you can start a new group with your friends. Think of all the exciting possibilities without me holding you back. Why would you protect my job and not theirs? She asked. Because Bobby needs his mother in his life. Your job may not pay much, but it's enough for you to live on without asking me for money. One day, when he asks how I treated you in the divorce, I'll be able to say I was fair. If you tell him otherwise, I'll show him proof. What Tracy and her friends didn't know was that I had known her lover's real identity all along, thanks to my private investigator. Engineers solve problems by gathering information, and that's exactly what I did. Beatrice sued Tracy's workplace for $1.5 million and settled for a cool $1 million. After her fee, I walked away with $750,000. On the same day I got the check, I wrote Tracy a lump sum for $42,000 to cover her alimony in full. With that out of the way, I could focus on building my dream house. Word spread quickly at work, and several single women seemed interested in me. But after the chaos of my marriage, I planned to focus on Bobby for now. Finally free, as I walked away from the courthouse, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Relief, certainly, after the battle for my son was over and justice had been served. But there was something else too, a lingering sadness for what had been lost. Years of my life had been wrapped up in a marriage that, despite its cracks, had once held so much promise. Now that chapter was closed, and I was free to start anew. In the days that followed, I moved into my new apartment, a place where Bobby and I could create new memories. It wasn't the spacious home we had once shared as a family, but it was ours, and it symbolized a fresh start. Every morning I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing I was doing everything I could to provide a stable and loving environment for my son. Tracy, for her part, honored the visitation schedule. She seemed subdued, her fiery attempts to rekindle our relationship replaced with a quiet acceptance of the life she had chosen. We coexisted peacefully for Bobby's sake, and while I sensed she regretted her choices, I was past caring. My focus was solely on my future, on my son, my career, and eventually, the idea of finding someone who shared my values. The settlement money from the lawsuit helped me build a solid financial foundation, and I found solace in the simple pleasures of life, playing catch with Bobby in the park, attending his school events, and enjoying the sense of normalcy that had been missing for so long. The scars of the past remained, of course, but they were beginning to fade as I realized that, in the end, I had emerged stronger. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was mine. As Bobby grew, I made a silent promise to teach him the importance of trust, loyalty, and respect, to ensure he understood the value of honesty in relationships. If nothing else, this experience had taught me what I would and wouldn't tolerate in the future. One evening, as I stood on the balcony of my new home, watching the sunset, I realized something. I wasn't bitter anymore. Yes, the pain had been real, and the betrayal had cut deep. But I was free now, free to live the life I deserved. The future stretched out before me, filled with possibility, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled, knowing that whatever came next, I would be ready.